Okay. I'm Ann Havlick. I'm co-president of the League of Women Voters of San Luis Obispo County, and my co-president, Cindy Marie Absey. So I want to welcome you to all of you who could join us this morning for our panel discussion on racial and criminal justice reform, a local perspective. Only 1 year ago, we began our league year with a program focused on voter service, with activities planned for voter education and voter registration in preparation for the upcoming 2020 election cycle. We also began our 100th year celebration of the passage of the 19th Amendment and the founding of the League of Women Voters. And we did it with enthusiasm and energy. But who could have foreseen the twists and turns and changes that awaited us with the new year? 6 months later, our world came to a halt with the outbreak of a coronavirus that became a global pandemic. Today in the United States alone, it has spread to every state. The estimate today is over 6 million confirmed cases in the United States and 193,000 deaths. It has affected the way we socialize, and it has affected our economy. Many bankruptcies, new unemployment filings this week have remained at over 800,000. We've had civil unrest throughout the nation, protests beginning with the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis, Wisconsin, and many protests against racial injustice. Our country has become less civil and more divided. The elections have become contentious, and many of us see questioning of our basic social values and behaviors. The West has become an inferno due to the thousands of acres burning, and as of today, there are 27 confirmed deaths and many dozens missing. Our air is contaminated with smoke and ash from Washington State down through Southern California. For our members, the League of Women Voters remains a constant in its moral and ethical values, and we are problem solvers. We miss in-person meetings, but we are looking at new ways to connect, to use technology and the internet and social media to continue our work in increasing and understanding major public policy issues through education and advocacy, and to continue our work in voter service. In our research for our Centennial Celebration, we have looked at our complicated past and addressed historic racism. Yes, we celebrate our cherished past and accomplishments, but we acknowledge our faults, and we will continue to affirm a commitment to diversity, pluralism, and affirmative action. We will continue to implement a policy of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And with that, I'd like to turn the meeting over to my co-president, Cindy Marie Absey.
Thank you, Ann. Give me just a second to get prepped here. So I'm going to be introducing introducing the panel, and then Ed Cabrera will take over moderating. In San Luis Obispo County and throughout the nation, we have witnessed civil unrest, protests, and demands for racial and criminal justice reform from a wide spectrum of people and organizations. Hundreds of years of racial injustice and the recent tragic events have culminated in this historic and challenging period of reckoning and potential transformation. The League is dedicated to social and political engagement and an informed community, and in the spirit of that mission, we have invited 3 local leaders in law enforcement, mental health, and racial justice to speak with us today. Please join me in welcoming our 3 panel members, who you will see on the screen shortly. Deanna Cantrell, Chief of Police, San Luis Obispo City. Jill Bolster-White, Executive Director with Transitions Mental Health Association. And Stephen Vines, President of the NAACP San Luis Obispo County Chapter. I will give brief biographical highlights for each panel member, and then Ed Cabrera, as I mentioned, a longtime league member and local educator, will moderate the panel. We have approximately 30 minutes for the panel and audience questions. The league is committed to civil discourse at all times, so we know we can count on everyone to be courteous and respectful. Welcome, Deanna Cantrell. Deanna joined SLO PD as police chief in 2016 after serving on the Mesa, Arizona Police Department for 21 years in a wide variety of leadership positions. While in Mesa, she chaired a diversity team and worked on a number of racial justice committees and advisory groups. In San Luis Obispo, she started the Police and Community Together PACT Committee, and in 2019 received an award from the Anti-Defamation League. She serves on the International Association of Chiefs of Police and chairs the Women Leaders Law Enforcement Committee. In 2018, Deanna was selected Woman of the Year for the 24th Congressional District. She holds a bachelor's degree in technical education, a master's in administration from Northern Arizona University, and graduated from Northwestern Police Staff and Command School. Deanna serves as an adjunct faculty member for Northwestern University as well. She was recently selected as a new chief of police for Fairview, California, and so Deanna's last day with SLO PD will be September 30th. We welcome Deanna. Jill Bolster-White. Jill has over 30 years of experience in nonprofit organizations and has served 28 years as an executive director. Transitions Mental Health Organization is a community-based mental health service agency. Jill is responsible for the management and development of a $15 million budget, supervision and training of 290 staff, administration of businesses and contracts, board development, marketing, fundraising, program design oversight, client advocacy, and community education. Jill obtained her BA from Cal Poly and MA in Public Administration from the University of San Francisco. She is past president of the California Association of Social Rehabilitation Agencies, past president of the board of SLO Botanical Gardens, an advisory member of KCBX Public Radio, a member of the SLO Rotary, and on the governing board for Sierra Vista Medical Center. Finally, she is also a member of the National Alliance for the Mentally Ill, also known as NAMI. Welcome, Jill. And finally, last but not least, welcome Stephen Reverend Vines. Steve attended Cuesta College and Cal Poly, where he majored in child and family development before moving to Michigan to study organizational management at Spring Harbor College. He started preaching in 1994 and was ordained a minister in 2017. He is a Montessori-trained educator and for the past 35 years has been an educational change activist, preschool teacher, and consultant in behavior management. Steve served as CEO of the Community Development Corporation in Toledo, Ohio, and was a San Bernardino Acorn organizer, and also active in the Christian Ministerial Association of Southern California. After relocating to San Luis Obispo County, Steve has served as an EOC commissioner for SLO County and on the Human Relations Commission for SLO City. He was the founding president of the NAACP SLO County chapter and now is acting president of the reactivated chapter. Steve co-owns Mesa Design Group and is CEO of Vines of Life Solutions. Welcome, Steve, Reverend Vines. Now I'm going to turn things over to panel moderator Ed Cabrera to give us some guidance on using the Zoom Q&A and other features that we need to know. Ed?
Good morning. Thank you, Cindy. And also thank you, Ann. I also thank the panelists who are joining us today. We appreciate your contributions to today's discussion. As moderator, I'm going to ask 6 questions of the panelists. I'll be doing it in rotation so that no one will always be the first to answer the question. For example, I'll be asking Chief Cantrell first, the initial question, and for the next question, she will be the second to respond, and in the third question, the last. And we'll continue that for the second set of 3 questions. I also want to welcome our viewers this morning. You have an opportunity to ask questions for our panelists directly. Look to the bottom of your screen to find a Q&A button. Click on the button to bring up a screen where you'll be able to ask your question. Volunteers will be then reading your questions. We'll be doing our best to get your question in, but the number of questions we field will depend on the time we have left. So let us begin with the questions. Chief Cantrell, what is your vision of a just and equitable criminal justice system in the San Luis Obispo County?
Good morning. Can you hear me, Ed?
Perfectly, thank you.
So I just want to thank the League of Women Voters for inviting me to be part of this panel and part of this discussion. We've had a lot of discussions around the same questions that we're going to get asked today. And so I think it's important that we have these talks. I guess I would just start out by asking, what is everybody's definition of what is just and what is equitable? Because, when I look it up, I looked up synonyms for it. And they are fair, fair-minded, reasonable, even-handed, impartial, objective, and unbiased. And so thinking about that, I guess I would tell you that the police serve the community, and we should police in a way that's meaningful to our community, and every community is different. And what's considered meaningful in San Luis Obispo compared to other places is going to be different. And what's meaningful even within San Luis Obispo is going to vary greatly because we have 47,000 community members, not including all those that come and visit our community that bring their, bring all of their experiences with them. And so, what does meaningful policing look like to a community is varies greatly. And so I'll tell you, in talking about fair and just policing, let me give you an example. So, is it fair or is it just? Is it impartial and biased when, let's say, somebody commits a crime, and whatever crime you want, theft. So somebody commits a theft, and that person that committed the theft it has admitted it, there's video, whatever. There's plenty of evidence to show, yes, that person committed the theft, and then that person is going to be held accountable for that. And so then I would ask, what does accountability mean? Because is accountability different based on socioeconomic status or race or gender or mental status, or if they are homeless or if they're a veteran? Does accountability look different for different people? And then who should decide what accountability looks like? And who should decide, who is and who's not accountable and to what degree they're accountable? And so, the law as it's written, you have should the police, should the DA, should the courts, decide that? And if it's now the police that start to decide that in order to reach a more just or equitable criminal justice, and you say system, so that's why I say that the law as it's written is part of the criminal justice system, the police are part, the DA's part, the courts are part, and the jails are part. That's kind of all, and probation. I mean, there's lots of different parts of the criminal justice system. And so, where does that start to get decided as far as those kind of things go? And so if it's the police, how do we start to decide who gets arrested, who doesn't, and what accountability looks like, those kinds of things. And so I think it's super complex. I can tell you that what we do is we follow the laws as they're written, and those are changing. There's lots of legislation right now that's changing. We try to treat all people with dignity and respect. We work super close with our marginalized communities that might be more affected by laws, and we change our policies, we change our procedures, we work on training, we hold ourselves accountable. We've shared all of our data on arrests and traffic stops with our community. We've hired diverse. I have by far the most diverse department in the city of San Luis Obispo, so people see themselves in our police department. And so, what can we do from a policing perspective? I think is those things, but I think the community at large has got to have a much larger and broader discussion on what is fair and what is just and what does that look like to everybody. So, my own personal vision for policing is to advance it, is to advance policing and public safety and public trust through looking through a lens on reducing harm. I try to look at everything through that lens on how does it reduce harm in our community. And so I'm sure we'll get to more of that in a little bit. I don't want to take up everybody else's time.
Thank you. Your response, Jill?
So I would say that the word that comes up for me, and my lens, of course, is in the mental health realm. I think that inclusion is really the key word. And I think that when I hear Chief Cantrell talk about advancing, I think that's actually been one important element in creating a more just and equitable criminal justice system, is to include people who are part of marginalized communities. And so that includes people with mental illness, it includes people of color. I think that is the key to advancing what our collective vision is. Certainly, I've been doing this for a very long time, and I would say since I started 30 years ago and now, a tremendous amount of progress has been made. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that. Right now, it feels like we're in this turmoil. There's so much going on that's alarming, not to mention creepy, smoky skies that don't help how we all feel. But I think if we don't acknowledge how much progress has been made and how much acknowledgement of these issues and how much more people are being included, I think we've lost part of the discussion. We certainly have a long way to go. I guess the other element that's really important in my world is how frequently people with mental illness are jailed, and primarily because their mental illness has been untreated. And I know that's a big issue for my organization and for just acknowledgement of the importance of mental health treatment. If we could make mental health treatment more accessible, diminish the stigma, we would go a long way in decriminalizing people with mental illness. I think that's still a big, big problem in this community and nationwide.
Thank you. Your response, Reverend?
Well, to add on what she was saying, my vision, we have a culture where a community mental health education is valued and offered to everyone, because one of the major issues is that, is our culture, that we need to end conspicuous consumption, which will release the world community from its addiction to money and its destructive power to destroy the earth and the morality of culture, and doing so with a free humanity from internalized oppression. Crime thrives when you don't have good self-esteem, poor social skills, and if we change our world where we didn't have a prison system, a court system that value mediation and restorative justice, and all police departments implement community policing standards and procedures.
Thank you, Reverend. The second question, and Jill, you will be the first one to respond. Do you believe systemic racism exists in our county? And if so, why?
That is really a very, very important question. And yes, I believe systemic racism does exist in San Luis Obispo County. And I think there are so many reasons for it. Some of you may know about the New York Times project, the 1619 project, that really worked hard to try to help us understand the foundation of racism in the United States. I think here in San Luis Obispo County, we can even look to the internment of Japanese farmers, locally. We certainly have evidence of systemic racism as recently as the 20th century. So the answer, the why, I think is definitely beyond my scope. I think, though, again, what we need to do is to really educate ourselves, try to understand racism, try to understand our own biases, try to understand microaggressions, all the elements that can really, really lead to continuing systemic racism. And so I know as an organization, I know Chief Cantrell talked about hiring and creating a diverse workforce. I think that's critically important. I think we do need to reflect the communities that we serve. We need to reflect them culturally and in language and in every way. And so I think I can't say why there is systemic racism in San Luis Obispo County, but I can certainly say that I feel like we as leaders all need to take important and significant steps in acknowledging it and eradicating it.
Reverend?
Well, racism is sort of an oxymoron in a sense because it's only one race, and when you begin to look at the whole construct of, how we begin to look at the whole situation, that, it's a matter of melanin. People who have more melanin, are, black people, and brown people have less melanin, and red people have less melanin, yellow people have less melanin, and white people have even less melanin. And, and when you have a culture that's built upon, the amount of melanin you have is how you are treated. And it's part of our culture, and it has been here since the beginning, of our country, in a sense. So, we need to change the whole language that we talk about it, because it's only one race. Because once you talk about racism, that says that there's other races. And that's a lie. So you will never be able to solve the problem because the context is a lie. And we need to look at, what the real issue is. And the issue is a matter of melanin. And then from that, all the other, should we say, stereotypes are added on top of that. But until we look at the concept for what it is, that racism is an oxymoron that was created to divide and conquer all of us, so that we can be divided and conquered and then controlled more easily. And like I said, racism has been a part of America ever since the beginning. And the question is not whether racism is here, is what we're going to do about it.
Chief Cantrell, you're the last person to respond to this question.
Thanks, Ed. So the short answer is yes. And the other part of the answer is the same as Jill's, is the why is, I'm not sure any one of us could really answer that completely. I think systemic racism refers to systems and structures, and the criminal justice system being one of those. We have a long history of racism, and as do a lot of other systems, banking and housing and education. And so this does not, in my opinion, mean that everyone in policing or in the criminal justice system is, or banking, education, housing, those kind of things, is now or has been racist. But I think that it means that the system was built on racism and therefore has factions of racism that still exist in it. From outright hate crimes that we see in our community, to, as Jill mentioned, microaggressions. So, and the why, I think, is complex.
Thank you, panelists. Reverend Vines, you're the first up on this next question. Regarding calls to defund the police, would it be effective to divert funds from law enforcement to social and mental health services for some types of incidents? Why or why not?
Well, like as being an educational activist for 40 years, one of the major concepts that we talk about is wraparound services. The issue is not about defunding, the police department and all of those things. It's about more effective policing. And to be more effective policing, we're going to need wraparound services, because the police are, they're only trained to deal with certain issues. And when you have wraparound services, social services, medical, mental health, and all of those services that's wrapped around in with the police department, then they can do a better job, because they can concentrate on policing and not having to be a social worker, not having to be a mental health worker, not having to be dealing with people, homeless people worker, and all of those issues that, one person, only can do so much. But I think the real issue is to have wraparound services. We got to get that concept out of our mind as far as about policing and cutting services. It's just that we need to have those wraparound services so we can support the police officers to be able to do their job, versus putting them in a situation where they have to be something super. And, and the odds are that they're going to fall short. They're going to make bad decisions because they're not trained for it, because they're human beings like anybody else. And it's all a matter of, stress level when you're doing the job and, being competent at it.
Chief Cantrell.
So I agree with Stephen. And I think the whole defunding discussion is more about restructuring, because there's been so many things that have been piled onto policing, when policing's, primary function is about crime and reducing crime. Jill mentioned it, with our mental health, and so many people that are suffering from mental health and not getting the services they need, and then they end up in the criminal justice system. And once they're in that system, hopefully we can have restorative justice processes and mental health court and those kind of things, and start to weed them back out of that process. But it's difficult once they're already in it. And so preventative work has got to be done. And so where does the money come from is really the question I think that all of us are trying to answer. And the problem is that the funding never came to the police in the first place. When mental health funding and housing and all of those things started to get cut, and this is back in the 80s, that funding didn't come to police officers. What came to police departments are the problems. All of the calls for service came to us with no training. And so we've played years and years of catch up. We now have CIT training that is incredibly good, but we're not social workers. And I mean that Stephen's absolutely right. We're not social workers. That is not, where we have all of our study at. We are really trying to reduce crime and prevent harm and prevent victimization in our communities. And so, where does the funding come from is the big question. And I think, my personal opinion is that counties states are going to have to find the funding to, like, we have John Clevens, who works for Transitions Mental Health, but he's embedded in the police department. And for the first time in, I think, probably 10 years, our calls for service regarding our homeless population, which have severe mental health issues, went down for the first time after having him in place with us for the last year and a half, almost 2 years. So it matters and it's important, and we need more funding for it. But what I would say is, you can't pull funding from a police department and say, hey, give me $1 million to hire these people so that we can take these calls for service from you. You've got to put the structures and the system in place first and find the money for it. And then I think if policing calls for service do start to go down, then rightfully so, however much that goes down and whatever that equates to, certainly use that funding at that point to help pay for those programs and to help further those programs and those kinds of things. And so I think it's conceptually the right idea, but just going about it by saying, hey, police department, we're going to take all this money from you to start this, doesn't necessarily work, because in the meantime, who's going to go to all those calls for service? The police are still going to go to all those calls for service over the next year, year and a half, or 2 years, however long it takes to get a system put in place. And so I agree with Stephen, and I'm thinking likely Jill, I'll also be agreeing with her as well.
Let's see that. Jill, you have final word.
Well, I think, I would agree that my previous answerers actually covered it. I think that the idea of defunding the police is a non-starter. It doesn't make sense. I think we all would agree that it's really a matter of how we can reform the departments that need reform, that we really are looking at best practices and training. And I know Chief Cantrell mentioned crisis intervention training, which is very specifically to help law enforcement officers understand mental illness, which can then help them interact with folks who have a mental illness to identify that. So that's a really critical element. I want to give Chief Cantrell credit for being the first person in the county to actually hire a social worker. And as she mentioned, the social worker is employed by us, trained by us, but is embedded with police officers. And I think that's a best practice. If that were implemented nationwide, that would have a tremendous impact, I think, both on people of color as well as people with mental illness. So I you know, we really are working at Transitions Mental Health Association to talk about best practices that we think will impact the community, community-wide. And so that's definitely one. I would say that if the Board of Supervisors and City Councils would encourage their police departments to look at that model and to really invest there, that acknowledgement can go a long way in preventing some of these issues. And I wanted to just say something I didn't mention about systemic racism that I thought of when Chief Cantrell and Reverend Vines were speaking. And I know Ann Havlick mentioned the coronavirus and the number of people who've been impacted. And we know the data shows that people of color have been much more impacted. It's the same in mental health. In terms of treatment and who gets treatment, it's very, very clear. The data shows that systemic racism exists in treatment in physical health and mental health. And I think those two elements are foundational in terms of how we can overcome those. So I just wanted to make that point.
Chief Cantrell, you are batting leadoff again on these next 3 questions. Here is the question. What would need to change with local law enforcement for people of color to believe that concerns and complaints have been heard and answered?
I can speak for my police department in this, and I am very familiar with what's going on in other police departments, not just in our county, but around the state, from my involvement with state organizations. I'm a region rep for Santa Barbara, San Luis Obispo, and Ventura counties for the state of California. And so I'm in regular communication with our 3 counties. And then I'm involved in some stuff, work nationally. And so I can tell you this locally. I'm a person of color. I'm Choctaw, Native American from Oklahoma. My family is from Oklahoma. And I'm a member of the LGBTQ community. And so when you ask me if I think my concerns or complaints are heard by law enforcement, at least in San Luis Obispo, I will tell you absolutely. And I just tell you that because I know the work that we've done over the last 4.5 years. And when you ask other people of color, I think a lot of them will tell you, yes, in San Luis Obispo, in the city of San Luis Obispo, they are heard. And then, you know, and some may not feel like that. And some may not feel like they are heard and may have some changes, you know, in mind for us. And what I can tell you is that I promise that I listen, and I am always, always willing to sit at the table with anyone who wants to sit down and talk about policing, who has ideas. And I always will come from the position of listening and learning first so that we can start to come together and grow together and build trust. And so that I can then teach the community about the complex, difficult work of policing. But I am always willing to learn and listen to any concerns from our community. And I'll tell you, over the last 4.5 years, all of my staff has been to a class called Principled Policing, which is about police legitimacy and implicit bias and principled policing. And I just had them all attend a class that's on exploring racism and white privilege. I've shared all my data from traffic stops and arrest data. We've shared as a county all of the data for in custody, everybody that's in custody right now. 100% of my staff has been trained in CIT. I started PACT, which is a policing community together, which is with my most marginalized community leaders, and we have done tons of work. I started PEACE, which is policing education and community engagement, and that was a way for me to take policing outside the doors of the police department and start to teach the community about, hey, here's what use of force is. Here's how it's governed. Here's the laws around it. You know, here is about body-worn cameras and video evidence and how all that works, because people really don't understand the criminal justice system. And so it's important that we teach people about that. I've spoken with immigrant communities and attended lots and lots of conversations about immigration and our laws in our state. And I've invited our community members in. They've taught us about cultural competency. And then we in turn help to teach them about policing. We've worked on policies together. I've changed our use of force policy, our hate crimes policies, our immigration policies, our unmanned aerial vehicle policy. All of that was worked on with marginalized community members that are willing to come and sit down and say, hey, I want to talk to you about this policy and your procedure. And we've changed the way we take hate crimes and the way we report hate crimes. We've reduced our use of force by 50%. We have had the lowest citizen complaints. And in all of that, we've also reduced crime to its lowest point in the last 5 years. So having a police leader that comes to it from that perspective, the perspective of I serve you, I'm in the service industry, and that is complex in everything that it means. But being willing to sit down with anybody that wants to sit at a table and have a talk, I think is paramount to our future success.
Jill, your contribution.
I am speechless because I'm so sorry that Chief Cantrell is leaving the city of San Luis Obispo. It is really, it's Fairfield's win, because I think everything she said is exactly the right approach. And I'm certainly not qualified to answer this question. I think, though, the list that Chief Cantrell just described is critically important to work to understand. I mean, I think I started answering my question by using the word inclusion. I think that is the way I've learned to be an advocate for my mental health population. And I think that's what Chief Cantrell has done. And that is a best practice, to have a group like PACT, where the NAACP and the Latino Outreach Council and Transitions Mental Health Association and Cal Poly and the Jewish Community Center, all those leaders are around the table and talking about the issues, talking about hate crimes, talking about body-worn cameras, all those things. We were able to learn, but we were also able to talk about our constituency and talk about those issues. And so a law enforcement leader who's willing to listen, who doesn't assume they know everything, is really a critical element in improving that. That's all I can say.
Your thoughts, Reverend?
Well, the main issue is justice. You know, when there's justice, you know, a lot of things changes when there, but we have a system of double standards. The next thing is respect, and then the and then the core thing is that people treat other people like you want to be treated. And you know, if the police departments had that attitude in our community, a lot of things would change, because the major issue is a double standard, that they police one community one way and then they police another community another way. And you know, that's the major issue, that, you know, that most the people in our community have a bad ideal about police officers, is because the way policing takes place and the double standard. And it all comes about because they feel that some reason that they can treat people of color like they don't want to be treated. And that's what racism is having one standard for you and then having another standard for somebody else. And that issue really needs to be addressed, which comes down to the core issue of our whole society, and that's emotional competency. Our society creates a citizenry that is not trained on how to have emotional competency. When you don't have emotional competency, when you don't know how you feel and you don't know how to deal on the feeling level, you become cognitive. And that cognitive side, you can use your ability to be apathetic, and you start making decisions on what you think versus on what the feeling situation is going on. And that's the major issue throughout, you know, on both sides of policing, from the police and from the citizenry, that we haven't been taught emotional competency, so it creates a whole bunch of dysfunctionality in all human interactions, which is really the major issue that we have to overcome to really address the issue of melanism, because it's not racism, because there's only one race. But once you come up with a consciousness of race, Black people become something different, brown people become something different, Yellow people become something different. White people become something different. And once you become something different, you can treat the other people as though treating them a certain way is not going to affect you because they're not part of you. And the truth is that we all are part of each other. And it's the major issue within our society that we don't have emotional competency. And that's one of the things that we want to do in NAACP. Our Unlearning Racism course is built around, emotional competency and dealing with being, but basically the core of it is emotional competency. And that's really the major issue.
Jill, you're first up on this next question. How should law enforcement respond to acts of civil disobedience that break the law? You want to turn on your mic, Jill.
Sorry about that. One of the things that we have done at Transitions Mental Health Association is really talked a lot about stigma. And one of the key ways that stigma can be decreased and eliminated is by having knowledge of a person, having interaction, sort of understanding what people are going through. That's been my experience in my agency. And so I think, again, it goes back to what some of the projects that Chief Cantrell has put together in terms of having people around the table that can have these conversations, because if law enforcement folks can understand and respect where people are coming from in their civil disobedience, I agree with what Reverend Vine said, that sort of respect and acknowledgement are the first elements. Training, I think, to help law enforcement folks feel grounded in a moment of tension or long times of tension. I think those are probably the key, is to really try to come from a point of understanding, of course, to make sure that community safety is kept intact, but I think really to try to come from a point of respect and understanding.
Reverend Vines?
The major issue is that as a behavior management. When we work with foster cares, daycare centers, group homes, and charter schools. The major components of our management is adult consistency, and the issue. We have a lot of times that when you look at the issue of the First Amendment right, that that law enforcement needs to be consistent, because if law enforcement is not consistent right from the beginning, that you will stay on the sidewalks, you will do this, you will do that, you will do this, you will do that, and when you're inconsistent, you create an environment where people will test to see if the rules apply. And for example, the demonstrations we were having here, they went on for 14 times. My issue with it is that, it's entrapment in a sense, because once you let something go on a whole bunch of times, then you can pick your time to stop it, and then you can arrest anybody or everybody, or, you create an environment where that, and throughout history, how it's been done, that you begin to pick off the leadership, and you begin to have a situation where it's unequitable and First Amendment rights are not upheld. But if the police do their job, because it doesn't make it, the major issue that we have to deal with is community safety. The community needs to be safe when there's a demonstration, because the NAACP, that's my first thing that I look at, that if we have direct action, that our number one goal is to keep us safe, to keep the police safe, to keep everyone safe, and to control the environment so that we can address the issue. But when there's inconsistency on both sides, it creates an environment where you know where the end at, because it's just going to get out of control. But if you start off controlling things from the beginning and being fair with how you implement the rules, being consistent, you can stay in control. But when you be inconsistent and you let things go outside the parameters, it sets up an environment where you just entrapping the the demonstrators by giving them bad habits and reinforcing those bad habits, so that when it's time to crack down on them, you can crack down on whoever you want to because they all got bad habits, and you can get everybody.
Chief Cantrell, you have final say on this question.
Great. And I'm glad Stephen brought it up. And I've told Stephen this before, is that I would love it if the NAACP would stand at the podium with me and say, we're going to enforce these laws strictly. We're going to, for you 300 or 1,000 people, I think in one of our very first protests, it was over 1,000 people who marched, not a planned march. So they violated the permitting process. And they violated the law the moment they took to the streets and started walking in the streets. All 1,000 people could have had a citation. And I told Stephen, if his recommendation is I write 1,000 people a ticket, that's, I don't know what world we live in, but that doesn't work. And we've asked people, please stay on the sidewalk. And I ask you instead of telling you, because if I tell you, get on the sidewalk, and you say no, and I say, well, I'm going to force the law, and I start to pull one person at a time aside with my whole 61 sworn who are not all there. So I have 5 bike officers with 1,000 people, and I start pulling one person aside to write them a ticket for walking in the roadway. What does everybody think is going to happen? They're going to probably not give me ID, or they're not going to identify themselves, or they're not going to want to sign their ticket. And when they don't, that becomes another crime. And then it becomes a crime for which I'm going to arrest you. And then the moment I go hands-on with you, we've seen what's going to happen. So as wonderful as that thought might be, that everybody just follow the law, that doesn't actually work. And for a law enforcement agency to say, hey, I'm going to just enforce all that, and I'm going to strictly, have you do these things, that puts us in a terrible position and actually makes it way less safe for our community. And so, trying to find first, absolutely, we should and we do uphold people's constitutional rights as closely as we possibly can. We absolutely respect people's First Amendment rights, but people have to understand that First Amendment rights don't trump everybody else's rights. Constitutional rights are equal. And so the constitutional right to be in a vehicle and move about freely on the roadway is when you're in the roadway illegally, the person that's in the roadway illegally should be cited. Can you drive and try to run over people in a car? No, you can't do that either. And so trying to find all that right balance, but trying to push 1,000 people onto a sidewalk isn't realistic. And I'm smart enough to know that just doesn't work. And so it would be idealistic to think that it does. And I think that'd be wonderful. And if Stephen wants to stand with me at the podium and say, I support Chief Cantrell in writing these 1,000 people tickets for being in the roadway, then I'm going to love that. And I appreciate that, but that still probably isn't going to happen. So we should do our best to try to balance on a very, very thin margin of error in having some laws be broken in order to keep public safety and in order to allow people to have their First Amendment rights, to be able to march in the street, even if it's unplanned. We've talked about if it gets small enough, if it's under 50 people, we've said, let's force them onto the sidewalk. And then everybody in this community needs to be prepared for what that's going to look like. Even if it's only 50 people, to try to force 50 people onto the sidewalk, and it's going to be super ugly. So I don't know. So it's great that everybody thinks that they could do it. Welcome to my shoes. And I'd like to welcome you to being the police chief for a day and try it from here.
We do have questions from our viewers, but prior to that, we are asking our panelists for one final question. Reverend Vines, what #1 message do you want this audience to take away?
The #1 message is that there's only one race, the human race, and that we got to change the context of how we look at humanity. We can't divide and conquer humanity because of race tone, because of amount of melanin you have. and that, we have to get past that, because as long as we call it racism, it will never be solved because it's only one race. So it creates a reality that will never be solved, because whenever you try to solve something that ain't there, you ain't going to solve it because it can't be solvable. So, that's the major issue right there. And that, criminal, and that, that's the whole issue that we're up against is oppression. That we have an oppressive system here. The police have to enforce oppressive laws, create in an oppressive environment of classism, racism, sexism, and all of those other issues that are in there. And that and if we don't create an environment where we teach the police and our citizenry to have emotional competency, so that and good social skills, we're going to have the situation of conflict, and when we have a situation of poverty, and then we'll have a situation where evil is done under the sun, and it's just going to happen over and over and over again. So we got to change the context, how we look at the whole situation.
Chief Cantrell, your number one message.
You need to get your mic.
Sorry. Okay. Am I there?
Yes, you are.
My number one message is that policing a community is super complex. Policing is super complex. And, there's over 18,000 law enforcement agencies in the United States, with over 800,000 police officers that engage in millions of contacts every year and over 10,000 arrests every year. We're human beings. We're not computers. We're not going to do it perfect. And who overwhelmingly entered this profession for very noble and very principled reasons. I know that there's a faction within policing that did not, and there's no one that wants to root that out more than good police officers. We live in a country with the most guns in the world, and we police a society that expects sometimes perfection from us. We have done and we continue to do really tremendous work in reforming policing, and we've improved use of force. We have improved our training, our equipment. We built trust with our marginalized communities, and I'm speaking from San Luis Obispo. But communities also have to engage in the work of increasing their own safety in communities, because from where I sit, there's some people that believe in abolishment, and that's.
We seem to have lost the video and the audio from the chief. So Jill, your final message.
Okay. I really would echo a lot of what the chief was saying in terms of staying engaged. And as I mentioned, a lot of the work our agency has done about decreasing and eventually eliminating stigma against mental illness, I think really applies here. The more we can connect, engage, listen without sort of having your own intentions coming forward, I feel like that is critical to this. And in this time, I think we're lacking hope. I think we need to have hope that we can improve, that we can listen, that and really they're all the tenets of the League of Women Voters is learn and understand the issues and try to suspend your previous judgments and really listen and engage. We need to be more inclusive for all these marginalized groups, and we need to hold ourselves accountable as well as law enforcement.
Well, as always happens in life, if you do a great job, you are given more work to do. We have additional questions from viewers. Here's a question that two people would like a response from. Janice Carr and Steve Lum would like to know more about wraparound services. Could you give us some examples, and how could they be provided to the community, and who would be providing these wraparound services? Reverend, your thoughts?
Yeah, wraparound services, well, when it comes with education, for example, when you are dealing with school system, teachers are there just like the police to teach. They're not They're, they can be a social worker. They're not doctors. They're not psychiatrists. They're not, social workers. And when we talk about wraparound services, we already have those components. The problem is that we have to create a intersection where they work together, where you don't just have a police department, that doesn't deal with mental health, that don't deal with social workers, that don't deal with this, that, and the other, that there's no connection. But if there's a coordinator that coordinates all the services to make sure that in all of those environments, all of those services are happening by the organizations that already provide those services, it's just a matter of coordination. And that's what wraparound services are, coordinating services that are already there for in all the areas that, where they're needed at.
Welcome back, Chief. The subject is wraparound services, and we are asking our panelists to provide examples of them and who would they be provided by and how. So Jill, your response.
So we have some great examples of wraparound services within our organization. So for instance, one tenet for homelessness is called Housing First. And so the idea is before you require a homeless person to take on mental health treatment, to not use substances, you house them first, and then you provide all that substance use treatment, mental health treatment, maybe getting somebody on benefits, getting them a primary health care provider. So we have a couple of homeless programs that actually are very robust wraparound services. Other examples of that in the mental health realm, and Reverend Vines touched on this, is again to have a comprehensive team that's addressing the needs. So what San Luis Obispo County has done is identified folks who are in high need of wraparound services. And so those folks are then put on a team where there is a psychiatrist, a nurse, a therapist, case manager, often someone who has lived experience with mental illness themselves. They work as a team to help get these folks very intensively on track with their mental health, getting services, getting back to work if that's what they want, doing all those, putting all those elements together that can really help someone recover from mental illness. So wraparound services are expensive. There is a big investment in wraparound services, but they certainly pay off. There's a lot of data. And I think when we talk about law enforcement in particular, I know for one of our Housing First models, actually within the first 2 years of that program, those folks had had hundreds of citations and jail days, and those were almost completely eliminated by housing people and then following up with the services. Because once you house people, you can really start to stabilize and move on from there. So wraparound services are very expensive. They're a big investment, as is all of what we're talking about. It's a real investment in human resources and in financial resources.
Chief Cantrell, thoughts on that subject?
I like what I heard, and I think the wraparound services are critical around restorative justice. We need services for people that are leaving the criminal justice system. I think the CDCR releases 3,000 people a month from the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. 3,000 people a month on average get released, and 900 are considered homeless. And so, we need job services, job training, housing, mental health, drug and alcohol, education services. We need all of those services wrapped around not just people leaving the criminal justice system, but hopefully if we had those in the beginning, we could prevent a lot of those people from ever entering the criminal justice system. So I think it's critically important.
We have one final question, and this is from Nancy Welts. Jill, you'll be the first to answer the question, and then we'll go to Chief Cantrell and Reverend Vines, who will be last. Here's the question. Would you talk about the Community Action Team, CAT, and how they came about? Has this team been effective in addressing problems in our community? Should our community fund more of these types of teams?
Yes, well, and like I said, I think that's the gold standard. I think to have a social worker embedded with a law enforcement department, and I guess the credit really goes to Chief Cantrell for saying this is something that she wanted to prioritize and to fund. So I know that we expected to have John Clevens, who's the social worker that we're talking about, engage with 100 people in his first year, and he engaged with 400 people. So he made a big effort to really work with folks who are living on the streets, or people, or in family settings where maybe the mental health was disrupting their family setting. And so he worked really hard to engage those folks, again, maybe with another program within the county, whether it was within Transitions Mental Health Association or within County Drug and Alcohol Services, but to be that conduit that police officers don't have time or the training to do. So that was ideal. I think the other thing that to me is really a best practice is John, doesn't have a police uniform. So he can walk in with a baseball cap and a polo shirt. And if he's that first point of engagement with that homeless person, or the person who opens the door in their house, who's had a police call that we believe has a mental health element to it, then he's really going to be able to possibly de-escalate that situation just by virtue of being, but not being a police officer, being somebody who can go in and engage and start that therapeutic conversation, and maybe then lead to greater outcomes. So I don't know if that's completely answering the question, and I'll have, of course, Chief Cantrell can talk about it from her perspective.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Nancy. The CAT team, so San Luis Obispo has a CAT team, the county has a CAT team, and then there's a North County in Paso, they have a community action team. And they all work pretty closely together. They meet regularly. All of our folks from the different areas meet regularly to talk about things that they're doing, things that they're trying. And then each of us at this point has, I think, and Jill, you might correct me, is there 2 or 3 mental health components as far as social workers that are now employed throughout the county?
I think 3.
Yeah, so it really is super effective, and it's effective in so many ways. Jill mentioned that, with John Clevens, he gave us a statistic when he came on with us that it takes a social worker only 11 times. If they make contact with somebody, bring them coffee, a sack of food, some socks, a sleeping bag. If they make contact 11 times with somebody before that person will start to accept services from them. It takes a police officer, I think John said somewhere in the area of 60 or more times for someone in a uniform to do the same thing, to build trust. It takes that much longer. And so those programs, that program is so important. I applied for a grant about 4 months ago, maybe, for another mental health social worker. We applied with Transitions Mental Health and County Behavioral Health. It's a partnership between really the 3 of us. And we don't know if we've gotten that grant yet, but if I could bring on another social worker, if I could bring on 4 or 5, honestly, I would. And then, of course, housing first models and having housing and that availability of stock. But, John knows things that police officers don't. He's trained as a social worker. And he's been good not only for our community, but he's very good for us in teaching us about, hey, here's 10 other things, resources that are available that we didn't even, maybe know about. And so it's really such a good program. There's a program in Oregon. If people want to look it up, it's called Cahoots. It's CAHOOTS. It's been operating for about 30 years. Denver started one called STAR, STAR, and it's based off of Cahoots. But I do think that's the future of where we need to be going.
Reverend.
Yeah, well, community policing is really the construct. 99.9% of all crimes are solved by the community, not by the police, because if the community doesn't, first of all, report the crime, and if the community doesn't come, and when there's a trial, if they don't come as witnesses and this, that, and the other, then police officers can't do their job. And that's the major change that needs to happen with all police departments. They need to be community based. They need to get out of those cars. They need to have a community, like a beat that they walk, and where they know the community, they know the kids, they know everybody, you know, and that they build relationships. Because to think that violence and conflict is going to keep us safe is insane. With guns and to be paramilitary and all of that right there, you need to have, you know, if you need that component, you need to have the other component too. But to spend all your money on paramilitary type enforcement is, you know, you creating the problem yourself, because you're just creating a situation where you're going to run against resistance, retreat, and retaliation. And you know, we got to cut that out of policing. The police will live longer. They'll feel safer when they go out. They'll feel safer in the community when they know the community. The community will have their back because they know the police got their back. But when you're in those police cars, and when you looking like you getting ready to go to Vietnam, and motorcycles with, you know, machine guns on the back, and that's the image you give, that's what you're going to get back. People going to resist that. So we need to have both sides. We need to have, when it's necessary for force, we need to be able to have force, but 99% of the situations, force is not needed. What's needed is a relationship. So we need to have a community policing, where those police get out of the car and they know their community and they ain't driving all over the place. They got a section in community. That's what they complete. And everybody know them, and everybody can call them, and it's a personal relationship, and that's where policing needs to go.
Well, unfortunately, we have run out of time, but I want to pass along one final message, and that is that the League of Women Voters has dedicated itself of late to the practice of civil discourse. So we want to thank you for being the model for civil discourse today. We want to thank you for sharing your precious time and also the dedication in your individual careers. And Chief Cantrell, we shall miss you. Adios. So I'm going to return this program back to its original order, and back to Julianne McAdam. Thank you once again, panelists.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for having us.
Thank you.
Okay, Julianne McAdam here, am I on?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Let me pull up my screen share. What? Somebody else. Force.
Dave, you're sharing your screen. I don't believe it's Julianne's screen.
And I'm not being allowed to share my screen. Should I try again?
Try again.
Okay. Okay, I think we're finally ready. I am here to present a roundup of the activities of the Centennial Celebrations Committee over the last year. Janice Carr and I actually gave you a report at last year's September opening meeting because we had already been working for 9 months. And we've mostly finished at this point, not completely. So we're here to give you a report. Our activities actually started way back at the opening meeting in September of 2018. At that meeting, 4 of us, Janice Carr, me, Ruth Nema, and Wilda Rosine, volunteered to be part of this Centennial Celebrations effort. And in November of 2018, Janice and I met with Ann Havlick and Cindy Marie Apsey to learn that we were going to be co-chairs of this committee. And at that point, we had absolutely no idea what we were getting into. In January, early January 2019, Janice and I met with the 2011 California Centennial Celebration co-chairs, Marilee Hyman and Trudy Jarrett. They gave us a lot of information and a lot of materials to get us started. And then later that month, we had our first meeting with Ruth and Wilda. In other early meetings, Glenn Stillaway and Patty Dale joined us, and then that was the extent of our committee for the rest of the time. We decided early on that we didn't want to duplicate the efforts that they had made in 2011. We wanted to make this celebration different, but we were very grateful for the help that they had given us. Between January 2019 and February 2020, we had 17 meetings in person, most of them over lunch at Wilda's or Ruth's. And the wonderful thing about this committee was that each of us brought our own skills, our own social network, our own interests and focus, and everybody had something to contribute, which made for a really effective committee. We also really enjoyed one another's company. Those lunches at Ruth's and Wilda's were really a lot of fun. After February 2020, we continued meeting via Zoom and email. We also had several community meetings. We wanted to make this celebration a community event, not just specifically a league event. So on May 29th, 2019, we had our first community meeting. We had representatives from 18 different community organizations that we reached out to who came and attended. We discussed our plans for celebrating, we discussed other groups' plans, and we discussed ways that we could all collaborate. In September, we had our second community meeting, and there was a similar attendance. We addressed some upcoming events and discussed our collaboration with the Monday Club. We also discussed the possibility of having a big community event on Mission Plaza for August 26th. In March, we tried to have another community meeting, but by then COVID had pretty much shut us down, so we didn't have any more after that. We did a number of presentations, 9 in total over the course of the year. Here you can see the variety of groups that we presented to and the different ways we paired up to do these presentations. All of these presentations were about the history of the League and the history of the 19th Amendment. And there is still more to come. We have 2 more presentations coming up in October to AAUW groups. And you can see on the timeline down at the bottom of the screen how these presentations were spaced out. We had some big events. This first one we actually told you about last September because we had already had it on June 4th, 2019 to commemorate Congress's passage of the 19th Amendment. We held a reception for women elected officials in the lobby of the county government building and then received a proclamation from the Board of Supervisors. On November 1st, we had a big reception at the Monday Club. We were very grateful to the Monday Club for working with us on this. This was a reception honoring California's ratification of the amendment, and it included video presentations from state legislators Bill Monning and George Cunningham, and in the lower left picture, their representatives presented us with a joint proclamation. And then Janice and I enjoyed hanging out with Thelma, one of our suffragists. The events continued in February. An awful lot of you probably attended this event, our League of Women Voters Centennial Luncheon at Embassy Suites. It was attended by 188 people, including league members and friends, local government officials, and officers of the state league. The highlight was the keynote speech by Dr. Carolyn Jefferson Jenkins, author of The Untold Story of Women of Color in the League of Women Voters. She spoke to the history of marginalization of women of color in the league and the challenges facing the league today. And it's good to note that she was the first president, African-American president of the National League, and we now have another one. So we're making progress. We also got a proclamation from our Congressman, Salud Carbajal, as you can see in the bottom picture there. He was very gracious in giving us a proclamation. Back in August of 2019, I started working with Joe Koski at the County Office of Education to try to organize a student essay contest. Students were challenged to write essays about the power to vote. We had 10 eighth grade winners, 9 of whom attended our luncheon. You can see them enjoying themselves here. Each of them received a gift card, which had been donated to the league, and certificates from both Congressman Carbajal and Dr. Eric Prater, the superintendent of San Luis Coastal. We tried to get some press coverage of these events and of the importance of the 19th Amendment. So back in July of 2019, there was a feature article in Central Coast Journal, an interview with Janice and me about the league's plans. In August of 2020, another feature article in Central Coast Journal discussing the importance of the two centennials, the League of Women Voters and the 19th Amendment, and the need to register and vote to honor the struggle. In August 2020, I published a viewpoint article in the SLO Tribune on two centennials and one important vote, and that article is on the league's website. You can read it and see the video that the Tribune found to accompany it. That's really quite good. And then we had various letters to the editor of the Tribune. We didn't get to have our big event on Mission Plaza, obviously, because things are still shut down. So our final hurrah was our banner over Higuera Street. This was funded by the Community Foundation, and we're very grateful to them. This is a picture here. Janice and I and Heidi McPherson, the CEO of the Community Foundation, stood in the middle of Higuera Street. We watched out for traffic and went with a green light to celebrate our banner. We hope some of you got to see it. There is one more event that we hope will come. We don't know for sure. Back in April, we were co-sponsoring with the local bar association the traveling Library of Congress exhibit about the 19th Amendment. It was supposed to be shown at the library downtown the first 2 weeks of May. We're hoping that it comes back this coming April. If all goes according to plan, there will be a sneak peek for league members and bar association members on April 29th and public viewing between May 1st and May 15th. So stay tuned and keep posted. We'll try to let you know if that actually happens. We do want to thank our sponsors. We got a generous contribution from the Community Foundation that helped us both with our February luncheon and with the banner, as I just mentioned. San Luis Obispo Repertory Theater gave us a contribution. We were supposed to have an event in June. They gave us the dress rehearsal night of The Marvelous Wonderettes. That's another thing that didn't happen. We also wanted to give special thanks to San Luis Coastal Unified School District, Burden Marketing, Adele Stern, a SLO League member who gave us a generous contribution, Joe Koski, who helped with the essay contest, Don Rodden, Creative Design Graphics, who designed our February program for us, Cynthia Anthony, who was the actress who portrayed Carrie Chapman Cat at our February luncheon, and then Mosaic Business Services, Jennifer Alton and Melissa Mertogel, who contributed money for the Student Essay Awards. And thanks to all who contributed to our events during the past year. We're very grateful. And that's it. Are there any questions? No. Good.
So thank you so much, Julianne and the Centennial Committee. You have done a stupendous, wonderful job. We're so proud of you and all of the things that you accomplished in this past year or 2
years, actually. It's been 2 years. And thank you. We feel really good about our efforts. We've been patting ourselves on the back a bit because
As well you should.
Thank you.
Yes. So we're now going to have committee reports for committee chairs. Please be ready to start your video and unmute yourself when you are individually introduced, but not before. So I'm going to go on to the committee presentations, and we have Julie Rodewald, Chair of Voter Service. Julie?
Hello, everybody. This is a great presentation. I'm so impressed that we're pulling everything off in this virtual age. Dave, I didn't tell you, but I do have just a slide to show. If you could allow me to share screen.
You got it.
Okay, so now I just have to figure out where it is. Hang with me for a sec as we, there we go. Okay, now I'm even more challenged because I lost my, what I was gonna say to everybody. So hang on here with me. And then I'll come back to that. Maybe it won't work. I'm gonna forget the share screen for a moment so I can get talking to you guys about what we've been doing. So this election year, as Ann said early on, has presented the League with a new set of challenges as we navigate this virtual world and how best to encourage our citizens to register, learn, and vote. And even though we can't hold in-person events, our work continues, and we need your help in supporting our committee chairs that have been so hard at work to make sure the League is front and center in the lead up to this election. If you are interested in joining any of these efforts, email me at the voter service email, and that's what's on the slide that I'll pop up at the very end of this, and I'll forward your interest onto the appropriate committee. So let me just tell you what's going on. Pros and cons, we have 12 state propositions that are on the ballot for this election, and several presentations to organizations are scheduled in October. Sharon Whitney, who chairs that committee, is heading up this effort and says that she has these two presentations staffed, but members are still encouraged to participate as presenters if we have future events. We have 8 possible candidate forums that are scheduled via Zoom. Some of these will be hosted by AGP Video, while others are going to be hosted either by the League or the sponsor for the event. So if you're interested in participating, there will be roles for timers and sorters. The sorting will be done actually before the event, and especially moderators, as well as anyone who has expertise in Zoom webinars and live streaming on Facebook. The best thing is that you can participate from the comfort of your own home. Co-chairs Marilee Hyman and Valerie Steenson would welcome your participation in this effort. On the Adopt a Poll front, because of the changes in the conduct of this election and the underlying health and safety concerns with COVID-19, our League will not be adopting a poll for this election, something we've done for many, many, many elections in the past. We have been told that the County Clerk Recorder has had lots of applications for poll worker positions this year, a very good problem for them to have. However, there are always last-minute cancellations, and we have let them know that we will have a list of potential replacements that can help out by filling these vacant positions. So if you're interested in serving in that capacity, you can email Patty Dale at her poll worker email, which I'll also put up on the screen in a moment. The roles that we would be filling would be outside voter assistant, which is basically the drive up ballot box drop off or ballot drop off, ballot box clerk, provisional ballot clerk, and assisting voters with the ICX ballot marking device. To participate, there will be a short orientation video, but the training will be done on the job on your first day at a voter service center. Rest assured also that the County Clerk Recorder has developed a comprehensive safety plan and will be providing PPE or personal protective equipment for all workers at the Voter Services Center. Voters Edge. Shelley Higginbotham and her committee are hard at work contacting candidates, and no additional help is needed right now, but we urge everyone to check the resources out at votersedge.org. If you type in your address, and your ballot will come up, and make sure that the contests that you think that you're eligible to vote on, your cities, your schools, your special districts, actually display on your ballot. If you find a problem or have any questions, you can email our voter services email or Shelley. And most importantly, pass on this information to your friends and families. It's a great resource to find information about what's on the ballot for the upcoming election. So voter registration, we have no in-person voter registration activities scheduled in the near future, but if you're interested as we move out of this pandemic, email me and I will put you on our group list. Hopefully we can get back into the high schools and at events in the not too distant future. In the meantime, we have worked with the County Office of Education to produce a public service announcement and a short video encouraging young people to register or pre-register to vote. These are slated to appear during the week of September 22nd, which is National Voter Registration Day. I know it's been frustrating that we are unable to participate personally in voter registration drives, but each of us can make a difference. Learn about how this election is being conducted and reach out to your circle of friends and family. Make sure they know what's coming. Encourage them to check their registration status, register to vote if they need to, and sign up for Where's My Ballot. And you can do all of those things easily on the county clerk's website under the November 3rd election. So I want to put a plug in for Lunch with the League. We're holding this every Monday at noon through Election Day and the week after. And if you've missed any of these first three events, you can watch them on our website or YouTube channel. We were just recently contacted by Cuesta College, and they will be advertising the webinars to their students. I think is a really exciting turn of events for us. And we encourage you to share this news about the lunches with your friends and family. You can find the information on the League's website on the homepage. And if they register for one of the webinars, they'll receive notification of each upcoming event. We hope that you'll find that is a half hour well spent. One other plug that I'd like to put in, although it's not technically a voter service event, for the last 2 years, Humankind, a fair trade store in San Luis Obispo, has opened its doors after hours for the League members to shop, and the League was presented with 20%, a donation of 20% of the evening sales. It was a great chance for our members to congregate, shop, and fundraise for the League. Even though these in-person events will not be happening this year, Humankind is still offering to continue their contribution to local nonprofits and will instead be offering us 10% of an entire day's sale, both online and in-store in early November. So look for the announcement in the coming month on what day you can shop with the League and help us on that day to support Humankind in their fair trade mission and raise funds for the League as well. And I want to, before my closing comments, I want to just put up that share screen so you can get the emails. Share. So those are the emails that I mentioned that you can use, and the resources as well. And I just want to say that, you know, right now our focus is on the next 52 days. That's how long it is until the November 3rd election, and making sure that we can get information out, that we can get people registered. But our work is going to continue beyond that. And even though maybe it's not as time sensitive in an off election year, it's still just as critical and as important. So please sign up for the Voter Service Committee as we move forward out of this pandemic and continue the very vital and important work of the League. And thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you so much, Julie. We really appreciate your presentation. It's always got a lot of valuable, wonderful information in it. Thank you. I'd like to introduce now Jordan Laguerra, who is chair of our Communications Committee.
Hello, everyone. Back in January, I attended my first league meeting, and I wanted to go from being a bystander to participating in democracy. And I thought, I didn't know what I would be doing, writing letters to Congress people, picketing, attending city council meetings. I wasn't sure what that would look like, but I thought the league was going to be my entree into doing that. And lo and behold, my experience as a coach working in the entrepreneurial online world came in handy, because the league was in need of revitalizing the communications that we were doing, and in terms of keeping our website updated and communicating what we were doing to our membership and to the local community. And so that is what the communications committee is doing right now, is revitalizing social media, the website so that it's up to date, our newsletter so that it's timely, valuable, a trusted resource, and it's going out in a consistent fashion, and you can depend on it. So I wound up being the communications chair a couple months later, and here we are 6 months, and lo and behold, COVID hit. So the communications department really became a lot of tech support for the other committees and all of their work. So we've been working very closely with Julie Rodewald, with Voter Services, and everything that they are doing so that we broadcast it. So if you are, I had no idea that this expertise that I had, this experience that I had, would come in handy. So if you are a person who understands tagging, SEO, writing, proofing, website updating, segmenting audiences, Canva, design, if those words make sense to you, then you might be one of our people, and you might be able to help. And if you, or we have a former accountant on our team who is a detail-oriented person, as you can imagine, and she has just jumped in and learned software and learned new programs and put that ability that she has, that attention to detail, to fantastic use on our team. So maybe you're that kind of person and you're willing to learn. And right now, with candidate forums and all of our endeavors, tech is so much a part of it, working on Zoom, as Julie mentioned. And my knowledge of Zoom has grown exponentially in the last couple months. I started out with pretty high base, and then it's grown. So if you're willing to be behind the scenes, and Dave Humphreys and myself have been behind the scenes on this meeting, making it run smoothly and coordinating everything, we would love to hear from you. So let me just share. I'm going to share a couple things before I sign off. Share your screen. Let's see if this is gonna work. Not working. That's interesting. Okay, never mind. But if you go to our website, which is lwvslo.org, there are two things that I would like to point you to. One is the Act Now tab. And under that tab is a page called 60 Ways to Get Involved. And it lists the different areas that you can get involved with. And take a scroll through that. See if there's something, some other area where you'd like to be involved. And then also under our news and events, that's where you're going to find, as the first subheading there, is Lunch with the League. And if you go there onto the Lunch with the League page, you will be able to see a button, register, and register for all of the remaining Lunch with the Leagues. So that's what we're doing. We're also making the communications more attractive, more appealing, and more apt to be consumed by the people who would be interested. And we're also interested in our collaborations, collaborating with local organizations and increasing our impact and our influence. So if you can help in any of those ways and are interested, we would love to hear from you and have you contact us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jordan, and thank you to your committee. You've done an outstanding job in a very short True.
And COVID. Crazy.
So I'd now like to invite Mary Bianchi, our membership chair, to do her presentation. Are you there, Mary? No, I don't see Mary. Okay. How about Sharon?
She is here.
Mary, are you there?
She is here. Let's see if she can unmute. Yes.
I'm here.
Hi, Mary.
Hi. I don't quite know why you're seeing only my background, but it's a beautiful background, so I'll just keep talking. So I am the membership chair, and I have a wonderful group of people that I work with. Cindy Batant, Carol Kersey, Patty Dale, Deb Humphreys, and Nancy Wells. Oh, there I am. And I want to thank all of them for their help. I also want to say that Jordan has made, and her committee have made our lives significantly easier in the last few months relative to some of our membership activities. The membership committee is kind of a nuts and bolts committee. Our role is really supportive of the program plan. Our program plan is looking at things like land use issues and water issues, homelessness, civil discourse, and the continued emphasis on all the work that Julie and her committee are doing. There have to be volunteers to do that. And so what the membership committee does is supportive of that program plan through the recruitment and retention of members to support all of those program priorities. And so this year we're really focused on developing a new model for helping people to join and renew their membership. I'm excited to say that in September of 2019, we had 103 paid members with 32 memberships pending. This year, we have 99 paid members with 62 memberships pending payment. And so also this is the time of year that we renew memberships. So if you haven't had the opportunity to go to the League of Women Voters website, and it's actually through the join button, you can very easily now renew your membership thanks to the communications team who made that all happen. So I would encourage you, if you haven't had a chance to renew, to do that. Also, we are continuing to work on putting our handbook and directory online. We're working with the communications committee on that. So rather than printing a paper handbook, we want to try to reduce our footprint a little bit and have much of the information in the handbook and also our membership directory in a protected location on the website. But our main goal this program year is developing a model for membership retention and engagement. And so I want to give a lot of credit to Carol Kersey and Deb Humphreys, who put together a process of trying to identify what volunteers are needed by our different activities. And they've been working with each of the committees to identify what program planning areas they're addressing, and also what kind of a person do you need to have help you? What kind of roles would they be playing? What kind of duties would they be doing? What kind of desirable technical skills would be needed for that? And a time estimate. So for instance, I'll give you an example. I do what I call the member management for our committee. And so a person who it would be good in that job is somebody who wants to ensure that things are running smoothly, maintaining current membership lists, responding to new members with welcome emails and facilitating their connection to volunteer activities, and then also working through this membership renewal period from June through September, and then working with other committees to reach out to them to see what their needs might be. It's a great behind the scenes effort. And if you're that kind of a person, then we would love to have you, participate with us. If you have any questions, please let us know. Membership at lwvslo.org. And if you renew, you'll get an email from me acknowledging that renewal. If you're a new member, we respond with an email that connects people to that Act Now button, 60 ways to get involved. And again, my thanks to the committee members and also to the collaboration that we've had with the Communications Committee. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary. We really appreciate the work that your committee does. Thank you. And the next person is Sharon Kimball. Did you want to talk about civil discourse and what's happening with you and your group?
There, can you see me now?
Yes, I can see you.
Okay, so I'm Sharon Kimball. I'm Director of Civil Discourse. And in January, when we have our program planning meeting, we are given direction on what our civil discourse team should do in the coming year. And this year, we received the direction to renew and strengthen civil discourse activities to ensure public access to the decision-making process and the safety and protection from harassment of elected officials, candidates, and other participating in public life. So in the beginning, prior to COVID, we had a lot of demand by other cities in our county to help them set up a democracy concierge service, which we've been doing for a couple of years now at the San Luis Obispo City Council meeting, which really does fulfill the direction that was given to our group in January. Unfortunately, when we went to COVID, the in-person meetings were not possible. So we, like so many others, had to transition into what do we do now kind of mode. We had also had other leagues wanting us to provide that training. So we have had multiple meetings on what to do. The first thing that came to mind in our group, and I want to thank, because I have some really great core members who have contributed to the design of trainings and workshops that we've done with various government bodies in the county and with other leagues across the state of California. So I'd like to personally thank Deb Humphreys and her husband Dave, and Carol Corsi and Charles Feltman. And recently we had a new addition, Marissa Balmana, who has been helping us with some of the new directions that we're taking. So that being said, we don't have the in-person democracy concierge service, but first thing we did was to make sure that the open meeting laws, when we transitioned, our government bodies transitioned to teleconferencing, were they meeting the requirements of the California Brown Act. And Governor Newsom did make some changes temporarily to the requirements of the California Brown Act because of COVID. I have been impressed by how our county has been navigating this, and especially Mayor Heidi Harmon, who has been a great support for our concierge service there and for civil discourse, and talks about that at every government meeting. We did something in June which was really different for our group, because we know that democracy, with the upcoming election, the foundation for that is based on various political parties, and we are nonpartisan. And we really want to make sure that we continue with that great reputation we have of being nonpartisan, of not supporting parties or candidates. So we worked with our co-presidents in the league and said, this time we need to look at maybe making democracy work better, one conversation or encounter at a time, and reach out to all of the parties in our county that are represented and see how we can help them maintain good communication and civil discourse in this challenging time where we have so many different issues to deal with, that has even more so because of the pandemic. So we sent a letter out in June letting all of the parties know that we were available to help them in any way possible in a nonpartisan way, providing them with the following workshops: leadership team development, civil discourse to go, proactive incivility prevention, building and rebuilding trust and social trust, and new leader transition. And one of the parties that reached out to us was the Democratic Party, and the leader of the county Democratic Party has asked us to do one of our trainings this next week. So we're preparing for that. I had invited a lot of the members and the members of our civil discourse team to participate in a recent collaboration between Braver Angels and the League of Women Voters of Snohomish County, which was based on how do liberal Democrats talk to conservative Democrats and liberal Republicans talk to conservative Republicans, and how do different parties talk to each other and try to find some way of being respectful and understanding others' points of view. And it was really a tremendous workshop. I came away with some additional skills that we can use in helping the different parties and even different government bodies after the election, because we feel there's going to be a lot of healing necessitated by whatever the outcome might be. And in that sense, we also have collaborated on a letter that we plan to send out to elected officials after the election on asking how we can help them. We also have put together a that we want to send out to reach the public through various organizations, either for-profit, nonprofit, just to reach out and provide them with the skills of how they can work together, and that we can bring people together to have the important conversations, to have all the stakeholders with the different points of view, and do what we've been talking about here in this panel of coming together and being inclusive. So we're excited about that after the election of having people come together. If you're someone who has a background in coaching, communication, mediation, or facilitating, and you're interested in reaching out and helping educate others on self-awareness and self-development so they can gain more influence and help build and rebuild trust, that is the foundation that's needed for all of us if we're going to move forward in these difficult times, then please contact me. And you can contact me at my personal email, which is sharon.e.kimball@gmail.com. So it's been a privilege to be promoting civil discourse for the last 7 years. And I didn't think it would last that long or there would be that great a need. But every year the need just keeps getting greater. But it's very rewarding. And if you want to be part of a really rewarding team that reaches out and helps the public and government bodies, we welcome you to join with us.
Thank you so much, Sharon. You've done a tremendous job for all those years you've been with us. Thank you. I now like to call on Neil Havlick, who's co-chair of the Natural Resources Committee.
I think that Anne exited the meeting. So Cindy Marie, who is the next on the agenda? We'll wait for her to come back for Neil.
Okay, can you hear me? Next on the agenda is program planning, Deb Humphreys. Deb, are you ready to go? Is Deb ready to go?
I'm ready. I thought Neil was going to be next, but I can.
Well, we lost him, so
Okay.
Click on start video.
Yeah, got it. Am I there? Yeah. Hi, everybody. Whoop.
I'll send Ann a text and let her know that he'll follow you, Deb.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Somehow I lost my my screen there.
No, we can see you.
Well, you can see me? Okay.
I can see you.
I can't see a thing. Okay. Well, welcome. I'd like to give you an idea about what our program planning process is. And And what do we mean by program, first of all? And there were some very important, useful resources on our national website, because quite frankly, my role's mostly been in facilitating the program planning process. And so now I'm learning more about why do we have this, what's it all about, and what's the context. And what I'm really impressed with it, this is the opportunity that we have through the program planning process to influence change. This isn't truly a bottom-up organization, and one that is influenced by our local leagues. So what we do each year is to get together and review where we are with current programs and see, okay, what's missing? What might be another area that we want to use to guide our actions? We're all very busy in different ways with the league and outside of the league. So we want to shape our time and energy and resources in a very focused way. The program planning, or what we call the platform or the guide that we have, that shapes our time and energy and actions. So the current areas that we have focused on based on last year's program planning are certainly voter education, voter services, land use, water, natural resources, homeless, and of course, civil discourse. So having this as a guide to say, okay, we don't have resources or time to devote or to get off track. How can we shape programming to fit around these different areas? And again, we are aligned. We try to check in with each other and report back up to the board during our meetings. And that's going to be tightened up a bit. The difference that you'll see this year is that we're not just going to stop accountability at the end of this program planning meeting. There will be an opportunity for the leads of each program area to have a more formal process of indicating, okay, so what have we been doing? How is this aligned with what we said we're going to do? And so forth and so on. So expect to see a lot more tightening of the follow-up process and what I call the feedback loop. We really want people to know, okay, are we doing what we said we're going to do? What's going to look like? How can people get involved? How do we shape this program? Again, the annual program planning meeting, usually we've been doing it sort of in a fun way to get people engaged. I've been using the World Cafe approach, which is a very interactive small groups where we are actually face-to-face. I guess we'll probably be using Zoom this year, but it has provided an opportunity for people to connect with each other in person and to build on each other's ideas, get to know what kind of resources. And I can brag a bit, that's how we got Jordan last year. We invited her to this program planning meeting as her first opportunity to get to know the league. And this is what happened to me. I think yes, it was Mary Lee who snatched her up right away after the program planning meeting. So we really get to know each other, get to know our talent, get to know each other's interests, and make it an opportunity to connect as well as build. So I think the main takeaway about program planning, it really walks the talk about the league's amazing bottom-up local league influence that we have in shaping state league program as well as national. Yeah, I think because we're short of time, I'm going to stop here, but I can't see anybody. I just see a big Zoom sign in front of me, so I don't know who's out there or who's next. So I will just stop here. If there are any questions, please let me know.
Thank you so much, Deb. It's
okay.
Taking that on. So we really want to encourage people to participate in the program planning. It's how we decide what we're going to be working on for the next year or so. So Neil Havlick, Chair of the Natural Resources.
Okay. Hi, everybody. The Natural Resources Group is monitoring, I guess is the right word to use, about 6 different activities or programs at this point. And I'd like to just briefly go through each of them. Is anybody there? And I don't think I'm on.
Yeah, you're on. You're on.
Am
Keep
I?
going.
Okay.
You're just not going to see anybody
Oh,
because
okay.
they're all
Okay.
getting off.
Okay. All right. Well, the activities are, and they're in varying levels of, what should I say, of varying degrees of intensity, I guess, or how current they are. They're all somewhat long-term. There's nothing that I see that would be coming up in the next couple of months, but I'll just walk through them very quickly. The first is Diablo Canyon. What's happening there is that there is a discussion going on about what to do about the open space lands of the Diablo Canyon property, which is about 12,000 acres, once the plant closes. That does not include the plant and its surroundings itself, which is about 700 acres. That's going to go on, you know, decommissioning there may go on for years and years. But there are groups looking at the lands north of Diablo Canyon, the lands south of Diablo Canyon, and what's called Wild Cherry Canyon. So there are 3 different groups. But making it much more interesting is that there is a policy by the PUC that gives Native American groups that have been recognized by PUC, you might say sort of first dibs on some of these lands. This is to be purchased, not to just be given to them. So there's some hurdles there. And there is a group that is very interested and has been recognized by the PUC, part of the Chumash Nation, that is interested in and kind of laying claim to the area north of Diablo, of the plant itself. So that's going to be very interesting to see how that all plays out. Another item that we're watching is groundwater, primarily the Paso Robles groundwater basin and some of the administrative and legal maneuvering that's going on there. And recently we've gotten wind of some similar kind of stuff going on in the Edna Valley. So we're looking at that, and Eric Greening is kind of taking the lead on that, that program and watching it. The Oceano Dunes, as you may know, that it has been closed to all the vehicle activity because of the COVID-19. And there's a question of when it would reopen. I don't think it's a question of if, but it is a question of when. And what has happened is that the terns have just, with the cessation of the off-road vehicle activities, terns have started nesting in a whole bunch of places where they never nested before, and or haven't nested for quite a while, let's put it that way. And so that's been, that has become an issue for the reopening. The other matter there at the dunes is that for years there's been discussion of a south access, and the State Parks Department is trying to figure out some way to do that, to try to accommodate the concerns of the Oceano community. But those have some severe environmental effects if there would be a southern access. And so that has gotten the environmental community kind of riled up. So we don't know where that one is going. Kim Murray herself was, before she retired at the city of San Luis, was very active in climate change activities, or trying to accommodate and to slow the rate of climate change through actions that the city government could take. And that's been expanded now to be looking at what other cities and the county government are doing to ameliorate climate change and greenhouse gas emissions. So those are various activities that are going on. The last two activities, one is the what's called the Dana Reserve in Nipomo. This is a large 1,270 unit residential development on about 300 acres. That is about a third of that property is oak woodland. And the proposal has been to basically take out about 90% of that oak woodland, 101 out of 112 acres, and 3,500 out of about 4,100 oak trees. So that has gotten the California Native Plant Society pretty excited. And so there is some issues coming up on that project. Also, there is a question, as is often the case in Nipomo, is where does the water come from? So those are going to be issues. That's a project that's just getting underway and is going to be quite controversial. And then finally, we're just watching at this point the old Santa Margarita Quarry project that was denied about 4 years ago by the County Board of Supervisors, but everybody in the Santa Margarita area is convinced that that project is going to be coming back sometime soon. So we're watching that. The issue there is not so much the quarry itself, but is the access and the scale of the operation, which proposes to use Highway 58 as the major access into the and out of the quarry. And folks in Santa Margarita are very unhappy about it. There has been no evidence right now that that is has resurfaced at this moment, but folks are expecting it. You know, it may happen at any time. So those are the major activities that we're watching. There are some other ones, but these are the ones that the group decided to concentrate on. And that's my report.
Thank you, Neil. And thank you all committee chairs for your hard work this year and plans for the upcoming year. We're going to make this, the final comments short and sweet in the interest of time. We'll try to end close to on time. First, I want to thank Ann, and I want to thank all of our members for joining us today, and guests as well. And a huge shout out to our talented panel, and Ed Cabrera for moderating the panel. I think, I know I found the panel very thought-provoking and informative, and lots of food for thought there. And a big thank you also to our hardworking committee chairs and committees that are really the heart and soul of the League. And finally, to our members, we hope that today's meeting and updates on the committees or the panel will inspire you to become more engaged in League activities. It can be very, very fulfilling work. And as you have heard from the various committee chairs, there's lots of different ways to be involved. So if one thing doesn't excite you or inspire you, we hope that something else will. Thank you all. Ann, any final comments?
No, I think you said everything, except this will be available. The panel discussion will be available on our website, correct? A link
Yes.
to the website, and also I think through Facebook, I'm not sure. But we're just very grateful for your attendance and for all the work, and a great, great panel. Cindy Marie, you did a wonderful job putting it together. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great afternoon.
Okay. Bye-bye.